What if the most dangerous addiction of our time isn't drugs, alcohol, or even social media, but our compulsive need to know everything about everything right now? The average person consumes the equivalent of 174 newspapers worth of information daily, 5 times more than in 1986, according to research from UC San Diego. Yet despite drowning in this ocean of data, we've never been more anxious, divided, or mentally exhausted. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus warned us over 2 millennia ago, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to external things. Here's a radical proposition. Your obsession with staying informed about every breaking news story, viral controversy, and trending topic is not making you a better citizen, it's making you a worse human being. The relentless pursuit of informational omniscience has become a form of intellectual gluttony that's poisoning our capacity for deep thought, genuine relationships, and meaningful action. Throughout history, the wisest individuals have practiced what we might call strategic ignorance. Socrates famously declared, "I know that I know nothing," not from false modesty, but from genuine wisdom about the limits of human knowledge. The Buddha spoke of the monkey mind, the restless, chattering consciousness that jumps from thought to thought, never settling on anything substantial. Even in more recent times, before the internet, great thinkers understood this principle. Charles Darwin deliberately avoided reading newspapers during his most productive research periods. Virginia Woolf wrote about the necessity of protecting one's inner life from the cotton wool of daily trivial concerns. Today, we've created an unprecedented experiment in human consciousness. Never before has a species attempted to process such vast quantities of information simultaneously. Your smartphone delivers more news in a single morning than your great-grandfather received in an entire month. We're running Stone Age brains on Information Age software, and the system is crashing. Consider this. How many of the urgent news stories you consumed last year actually required your immediate attention? How many of those breaking news alerts changed your behavior in any meaningful way? The brutal truth is that most of the information we compulsively consume is what psychologist Daniel Kahneman calls mental junk food, stimulating in the moment but nutritionally worthless for our actual lives. Why do we do this to ourselves? The answer lies in our evolutionary wiring. Our brains evolved to be hyper-vigilant about threats in our immediate environment. The rustle in the bushes could be a predator. The stranger approaching might be hostile. This negativity bias served us well when dangers were local and actionable. But modern media has weaponized this ancient circuitry. Every news outlet knows that fear, outrage, and urgency capture attention more effectively than nuance, context, or genuine importance. They're not evil, they're simply responding to market incentives that reward engagement over enlightenment. The result? We've become information addicts, constantly checking for the next hit of novelty, the next reason to feel informed, superior, or righteously angry. We mistake the artificial stimulation of our threat detection systems for genuine awareness, confusing the consumption of information with the cultivation of wisdom. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of our information addiction is how it's become socially mandated. We fear being caught uninformed at dinner parties, looking foolish in conversations, or appearing disengaged from important issues. But this fear is largely manufactured. When was the last time someone actually challenged you for not knowing about some trending controversy? And when they did, What were the real consequences? The truth is that most of what passes for staying informed is actually sophisticated procrastination, a way of feeling productive while avoiding the harder work of improving ourselves, deepening our relationships, or contributing meaningfully to our communities. What if the most subversive act in our hyper-connected world isn't protesting in the streets, but simply saying, "I don't know, and I don't need to know"? The Roman emperor and philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself," in your way of thinking. He ruled the most powerful empire in human history, yet understood that true power comes not from consuming more information, but from mastering what deserves your attention. Strategic ignorance isn't about becoming uninformed, it's about becoming selectively informed. It's the difference between being a passive consumer of whatever information happens to reach you versus being an active curator of what enters your consciousness. This is what we might call cognitive sovereignty, the radical act of taking control over your own mental real estate. Consider the profound wisdom embedded in Epictetus' seemingly simple advice when he suggests being content to be thought foolish about external things. He's not advocating for actual ignorance. He's pointing toward a deeper understanding that the opinion others hold about your knowledge of current events has virtually no bearing on your actual worth, competence, or contribution to the world. Here's where it gets philosophically interesting. The more you deliberately choose not to know certain things, the more genuinely informed you become about what actually matters. It's a paradox that would have delighted ancient philosophers be embracing ignorance about the trivial. You create space for wisdom about the essential. Think about the last time you had a truly deep conversation with someone you care about. Were you discussing the latest political scandal, the newest celebrity controversy, or the most recent market fluctuation? Or were you talking about hopes, fears, dreams, challenges, and the fundamental questions that shape a human life? The most meaningful conversations happen in the spaces that news cycles never touch. Modern neuroscience validates what ancient philosophers intuited. Attention is finite, and what we pay attention to literally reshapes our brains. Dr. Michael Posner's research shows that our neural networks strengthen based on repeated use. If you constantly train your brain to jump from one piece of breaking news to another, you're literally rewiring yourself for distraction and superficiality. Conversely, when you practice what we might call attentional fasting, deliberately choosing not to consume certain types of information, you create space for deeper neural pathways to develop. You become capable of sustained thought, genuine empathy, and creative problem solving in ways that the constantly stimulated brain simply cannot achieve. But let's dig deeper into the social pressure aspect. Why do we feel so compelled to stay informed about things that have no direct impact on our lives? The answer lies in what sociologist Pierre Bourdieu called cultural capital, the idea that certain types of knowledge function as social currency. In our current cultural moment, being able to reference the latest news story, analyze the most recent political development, or have an opinion about trending topics has become a form of social signaling. We use our awareness of current events to demonstrate that we're engaged, intelligent, and socially relevant. But this creates a vicious cycle. The more we use information consumption as a form of social performance, the more we need to consume to maintain our status. We become trapped in what we might call the informational hamster wheel, running faster and faster just to stay in the same place socially. Here's a disturbing truth that most people haven't fully grasped. In the modern economy, your attention is literally being harvested and sold. Every news notification, every breaking news alert, every "you won't believe what happened next" headline is part of a sophisticated system designed to capture and monetize your mental energy. The average American checks their phone 96 times per day, once every 10 minutes during waking hours. Each check fragments your attention, disrupts your train of thought, and subtly rewires your brain for dependency on external stimulation. You're not choosing to stay informed. You're being systematically trained to be unable to tolerate not knowing. When you practice strategic ignorance, you're not just improving your mental health, you're engaging in a form of economic resistance. You're refusing to participate in the attention economy that profits from your distraction and anxiety. But doesn't staying informed make us better citizens? Isn't there a moral obligation to be aware of injustice, suffering, and important social issues? This is perhaps the most sophisticated justification for information addiction, and it deserves a nuanced response. Yes, you have ethical obligations to your community and society. But ask yourself honestly, when you consume news about distant tragedies, political scandals in other countries, or social issues you have no power to influence, what concrete actions do you take as a result? More often than not, our news consumption functions as a form of moral licensing. We feel virtuous for being aware of problems without actually doing anything to solve them. True ethical engagement requires depth, not breadth. It's better to genuinely understand and act on one issue that's within your sphere of influence than to have superficial awareness of 100 issues you can do nothing about. What would happen if you discovered that the secret to becoming truly wise wasn't learning more, but unlearning the compulsion to know everything? The Zen master Suzuki Roshi captured this paradox perfectly. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. The person who believes they must stay informed about everything has closed their mind to the infinite possibilities that exist in the space of conscious unknowing. We live in a culture that has pathologized uncertainty. "I don't know" has become a confession of inadequacy rather than recognition of wisdom. But the greatest philosophical and scientific breakthroughs have always emerged from comfortable relationship with uncertainty. Einstein's theory of relativity didn't come from someone who knew everything about physics. It came from someone willing to question fundamental assumptions that everyone else took for granted. When you say, "I don't know" about the latest political controversy, you're not admitting ignorance, you're asserting intellectual sovereignty. You're declaring that your mental bandwidth is too precious to waste on information that adds no value to your life or the lives of those you care about. Here's what happens when you begin practicing strategic ignorance. You don't become less intelligent, you become more intelligently focused. Your conversations become deeper because you're not constantly distracted by the urge to reference current events. Your relationships improve because you're fully present rather than mentally rehearsing opinions about topics that don't matter. You discover that the person who knows a little about everything and a lot about nothing is actually the least informed person in the room. Meanwhile, the person who knows deeply about a few things that truly matter becomes a source of genuine wisdom and insight. Research from Harvard's Dr. Judson Brewer shows that when we reduce information input, our brains activate what's called the default mode network, the neural circuitry associated with creativity, self-reflection, and meaning-making. This is the mental space where insights emerge, where you process your experiences and where you actually develop wisdom rather than just accumulating data. The constantly informed person has essentially hijacked their default mode network, replacing creative introspection with reactive consumption. They mistake the mental buzz of information processing for intellectual activity, but they're actually preventing their brains from doing the deeper work of integration and understanding. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of strategic ignorance is social. It requires genuine courage to say, "I don't follow that," when everyone around you is discussing the latest news cycle. It means risking the social anxiety of appearing disengaged or uninformed. But here's what's fascinating. Most people secretly envy those who have the strength to disconnect. They admire the person who can say, "I don't watch the news," with confidence rather than apology. Why? Because deep down, everyone knows that the information overload is making them miserable, but they lack the courage to opt out. When you practice strategic ignorance, you give others permission to do the same. You become living proof that it's possible to be a thoughtful, engaged human being without consuming every piece of information that crosses your path. The ultimate irony is that by choosing to know less about distant events you can't influence, you become more effective at addressing problems you can actually solve. Your energy, which was previously scattered across 1,000 different concerns, becomes concentrated on the people and situations where you can make a real difference. This is what the ancient Stoics understood intuitively. Wisdom isn't about expanding your circle of concern infinite light. It's about deepening your effectiveness within your actual sphere of influence. The person who tries to care about everything ends up caring effectively about nothing. Just as we've learned to think about physical ecology, understanding that consuming more isn't always better, we need to develop an information ecology. We need to understand that our minds, like ecosystems, have carrying capacity. When we exceed that capacity, the entire system becomes degraded. Strategic ignorance isn't about becoming uninformed, it's about becoming selectively informed in the same way that a master gardener doesn't try to grow every possible plant, but cultivates a few species with exceptional care and attention. Here's the deepest truth. The person who practices strategic ignorance often becomes the most genuinely informed person in their community. Why? Because they have the mental space to think deeply about the information they do consume. They can see patterns, make connections, and develop insights that escape those who are drowning in data. They become the person others turn to not for the latest news, but for wisdom, perspective, and genuine understanding. They trade the shallow social capital of being able to discuss current events for the deeper social capital of being someone who can actually help others think through complex problems. The choice before you isn't between being informed and being ignorant, it's between being selectively informed and being informationally overwhelmed. It's between being intentional about what enters your consciousness and being at the mercy of whatever information happens to find you. Starting tomorrow, you can begin practicing the radical act of conscious unknowing. You can choose to say, "I don't know," without apology. You can redirect conversations away from the latest outrage toward the timeless questions that actually matter. You can reclaim your attention as the precious, finite resource it is. The ancient Greek concept of ataraxia, tranquility of mind, isn't achieved by knowing more, but by knowing what's worth knowing. In a world that profits from your distraction, choosing conscious ignorance isn't just a personal decision, it's a revolutionary act. As the contemporary philosopher Byung-Chul Han writes, "Today, thinking requires the strength to say no to excessive information. Only by protecting our inner space from information overload can we preserve our capacity for genuine thought." The most informed person in the room isn't the one who knows all the latest news, it's the one who knows what news is worth knowing and has the wisdom to ignore the rest.